It's been a little over 2 months since the Kamala Harris campaign unveiled their ace in the hole, their foolproof plan to win over male voters and dominate the upcoming presidential election. This plan didn't take the form of a campaign platform or a stump speech or anything like that. Instead, it took the form of an ingenious little totem, one that you could even purchase for a mere $40 plus shipping, that was located in the online merch store of the Kamala Harris campaign. And I'm talking, of course, about the official Harris-Walsh embroidered camo hat. Axios called the hat a status symbol for Democrats. This hat, Politico told us, is more important than you think. They wrote that it could even decide the outcome of the election as a kind of tipping point. According to CNN, that hat signified that the Harris campaign was serious about burnishing their credentials among young voters, especially white men. Watch.
I want to show our viewers something that our colleague Josh Campbell just pointed out to me, and I believe we have it. It's new merch. All the campaigns get merch up really quickly. But this in particular, as Josh is pointing out, is in orange, blaze orange. It's a color used by hunters for safety purposes. And that's what Tim Walz is. He is a hunter. And the fact that that is one of the first things that they are selling, that tells you a lot about the way that they are trying to get the white men.
I might get one. That's not I mean, there's a way to style that hat that could fit in with the culture, you know?
So there was so much optimism. Tim Walz is a hunter, CNN assured us. That's why he needs the blaze orange hat. And thanks to this hat, men are going to recognize how authentic and masculine Tim Walz is. Men will sit around at the pub saying to each other, gee whiz, that Tim Walz he's a real man's man. Did you see his orange hat? Trump campaign won't even stand a chance. After all, their hats are red, and men don't respond to that. They only respond to blaze orange. Now, that was the consensus in the corporate press anyway, but 2 months later, it's starting to look like the unthinkable has happened. The Harris-Walsh camo hat has not, in fact, exerted a kind of mind control over hundreds of thousands of men across the country. It has not guaranteed a Kamala Harris landslide, as expected. Instead, Kamala Harris's campaign is in free fall among men of every demographic group. A New York Times poll just found that nationally, Trump has a significant lead among likely male voters. He's up by more than 10 points. Meanwhile, a USA Today poll found that in Arizona, a majority of Latino men between the ages of 18 to 34 support Donald Trump. Among Latino men aged 45 to 49, Trump support is even higher at 57%. And for their part, black men are also increasingly turned off by Kamala Harris's campaign. New York Times reports that Kamala Harris, quote, still significantly trails Joe Biden's 2020 share of likely black voters. And the numbers show that she's especially far behind among black men. And you know what that means? Well, it means that Barack Obama is once again very disappointed. Now, it's no secret that a lot of things disappoint Barack Obama. He was disappointed when George Zimmerman exercised his right of self-defense to save his life. He was disappointed when Americans elected Donald Trump. He was disappointed when he had to cancel his 60th birthday party on Martha's Vineyard because the plebes noticed that he was disregarding the COVID rules that he pretended to care about. Pretty much everything that happens somehow ends up disappointing poor Barack Obama. But this time is different. His brow is really furrowed this time. He's more disappointed than he's ever been before. And specifically, he's disappointed in black men for not supporting Kamala Harris enough. Watch.
Barack Obama is back on the campaign trail and he's making the case against Donald Trump. But before his guest feature in Pennsylvania, Obama made a surprise visit to Kamala Harris's campaign headquarters in Pittsburgh. It was there that he got candid, maybe a little too candid if you are in the vice president's inner circle tonight. He warned that Harris is underperforming him with black voters, and he had a message specifically for black men.
Part of it makes me think that, well, you just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president. And you're coming up with other alternatives and other reasons for them. And so now you're thinking about sitting out or even supporting somebody who has a history of denigrating you because you think that's a sign of strength, because that's what being a man is, putting women down. That's not acceptable.
Not acceptable, he says. Just not acceptable. This is, and you get the finger wag too, the literal finger wag. That's not acceptable. This is how you know the internal polls are just as bad as the public polls, if not worse. The party of joy is now the party of scolding and finger wagging. And it's been that party all along. He's not even hiding his contempt. According to Barack Obama, black men can't possibly be upset with inflation or crime or anything like that. They must hate women. That's the only possible explanation for why Kamala Harris hasn't already locked up 100% of the black vote. Now, what's extraordinary about this is that Donald Trump isn't even polling especially well among black voters. He's just polling a lot better than any other Republican has in recent history. Trump has something like 20% support among black men, which is much higher than Democrats are used to. Still a small minority. But Democrats recognize that this relatively small shift could very well cost them the election. It could flip states like Pennsylvania, which is where Obama was when he delivered that little dressing down. So Obama is furious. He needs black support for Kamala Harris to exceed 90%. But men of all demographic groups aren't going along with the program. And that's why in recent days we've seen Kamala's campaign and her supporters go to increasingly desperate lengths to appeal to men. That cringy ad that went viral last week is just the latest example. It was created by a former director for Jimmy Kimmel named Jacob Reed. And in case you were fortunate enough to miss this at the time when we played it last week, well, here it is again.
I'm a man.
I'm a man.
I'm a man, man.
And I'm man enough.
I'm man enough to enjoy a barrel-proof bourbon.
Neat.
Man enough to cook my steak rare.
Man enough to deadlift 500, then braid the out of my daughter's hair.
You think I'm afraid to rebuild a carburetor? I eat carburetors for breakfast.
I ain't afraid of bears.
That's what bear hugs are for.
I'll tell you another thing I sure as shit am not afraid of. Women.
I'm not afraid of women.
I'm not afraid of women.
They want to control their bodies? I say go for it.
They want to use IVF to start a family? I'm not afraid of families.
They want to be childless cat ladies?
Have all the cats you want.
Woman wants to be president?
Well, I hope she has the guts to look me right in the eye and accept my full-throated endorsement.
Because I'm man enough to support women.
Man enough to know what kind of donuts I like.
Man enough to admit I'm lost, even when I refuse to ask for directions.
Man enough to not ban young women from reading Little Women.
Or one of those pants books that the sisters like.
I'm man enough to raw dog a flight. It sucked. Not worth it.
Now, it probably won't surprise you to learn that all of the men in this ad are actors, and they're mostly lying about their lives. One of them says that he braids his daughter's hair, but he doesn't even have a daughter, apparently. He also claims that he deadlifts 500. We can only assume he meant 500 ounces from the look of it. But something that might surprise you is that in the days since this video has been mocked extensively all over the internet, the creator of that ad, Jacob Reed, has not gone into hiding. He hasn't changed his name and fled the country in shame, never to be heard from again, although that reaction would be reasonable and prudent at this point. Instead, he just appeared on national television to double down on the concept and explain why everyone else misunderstands his marketing genius. Watch.
A Rorschach test and everyone wondering what they're seeing here. But what was your intention in creating this parody and the substance of the message?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, I think about masculinity a lot because I'm a dad now raising kids. And I think in this country, it's something we don't talk about a lot. And so I had this idea watching the back-to-back conventions where at the Democratic convention, there's men who are looking at the women who they work with or who they're in relationships with admiration and respect. At the Republican National Convention, you have, everything's about size, crowd size, this size, that size. You're playing Macho Man. Literally, Hulk Hogan is ripping his shirt off. I mean, it was such a cartoon of masculinity that it really, the juxtaposition was hilarious to me. Wow, you guys got that picture fast. Holy moly. So I come from comedy, and comedy comes from juxtaposition. And so to me, I was just riffing with my friends thinking, wouldn't it be funny if you took these ideas of like, so macho, you got to tell everyone how macho you are all the time, masculinity, and what I feel is a more real version of what it means to be a man, where, you cry at a rom-com, you braid your daughter's hair, you go pick up tampons from the store if someone needs like, who cares? And so to me, putting those together, but treating it like as if it's a real, rugged man political ad would be funny. And I still think it was funny.
Well, he thinks it was funny anyway. So he's explaining the joke, which is always a great sign. Comedy is about juxtaposition, says Jacob Reed. You get it? He's juxtaposing the idea of a stereotypically rugged man with things that aren't stereotypically masculine. And it's funny because those two things are being juxtaposed. That's comedy, as explained by the former director of Jimmy Kimmel, a comedian who himself has not told a joke in 20 years. In addition to not actually being funny, this guy's also not very smart because without realizing it, he proved the point that I made, that many of us made when last week. On the left, to be a real man, according to them, it means simply playing second fiddle to women. Any man who submits and assumes a subservient role is automatically a role model for all men in their view. So go fetch the tampons and braid some hair, and then you're a real man. That's the idea. This is a debased and matriarchal view of men that fails to resonate with any man, aside from the most effeminate and testosterone depleted. It is a vision of masculinity that appeals almost entirely to liberal feminist women and no one else. But increasingly, it's becoming apparent that nobody in the Kamala Harris campaign has ever spoken to a man who is normal and well-adjusted. That's the only explanation for why the campaign voluntarily uploaded this footage of Tim Walz going pheasant hunting the other day. They must have thought this would be a slam dunk. After all, Walz was bringing his own gun to go for the hunt. So presumably his handlers assumed that he would know how to load it for the cameras. But that assumption turned out to be very incorrect. Watch.
That's my theory. And it never fits quite right. Never fits quite right. It is not quite right. How do you give it back?
Governor, what kind of gun is it?
This is a Beretta A400. I bought it when I was shooting a lot of trap because it has a kind of their patented thing, a kickoff. So when you get old, it doesn't hurt your shoulder as much.
So it kind of looks like it's his first time ever handling a firearm of any kind. It definitely does not look like a guy who's familiar in any way with the firearms that he supposedly owns. As Larry Taunton put it, it looks like Tim Walz stepped out of an LL Bean catalog, eager to impress everybody with his hunting prowess, and everybody can see through it in about 10 seconds. Now, a lot of people are comparing this to Michael Dukakis' decision to ride around in an Abrams tank, decked out in a helmet and all of that. That stunt was supposed to make Dukakis look strong on national defense, but it ended up making him look silly, But really, it's not a fair comparison because Dukakis, for all his faults, never claimed to be a tank commander. He never said that he was an expert on tanks or someone who drove tanks all the time. By contrast, as you heard from CNN at the top of his segment, Tim Walz has portrayed himself as a hunter. That's why they sell the Harris Walz camo hats. And now we're learning that, like every other biographical detail we've been told about Tim Walz, it's apparently a lie. In reality, he didn't serve in Afghanistan, even though he repeatedly suggested otherwise. He's not actually afraid of spicy food, as he told Kamala Harris. He wasn't in Hong Kong during the massacre at Tiananmen Square, and now we learned that he has no idea how to hold a firearm. Now think about how desperate the campaign would have to be in order to send Walz out there with that shotgun. It's not just the fact that they decided to stage a corny photo op, it's the fact that they apparently didn't do any kind of preparation beforehand, even basic stuff like making sure he wouldn't make a fool out of himself. And then no one stopped this video from being released. In fact, the campaign began promoting it. It reminds you of all those staged photos of politicians standing over a grill on July 4th, wearing a spotless apron with creases still in it, holding a shiny spatula that an intern just bought from Lowe's 15 minutes ago. And you compare this to Donald Trump's viral video with a professional golfer a few days ago, and that racked up more than 10 million views because it was authentic. Everybody watching the video could tell that Trump loves golfing. He didn't struggle to hold his clubs. It obviously wasn't his first time on the golf course. It was evident that he loved the sport and everything about it, and he was good too. In fact, he started hitting a few drives that were better than the professional golfers. And by the way, would Donald Trump do any better handling a firearm? Probably not. But he's not pretending. That's the point. He's not pretending to be someone he's not. And if you want to appeal to voters, especially male voters, then authenticity is very important. Now, the Harris Walz ticket can't match this authenticity because nothing about the candidates is genuine. If you put a Glock in Kamala's hands, and she'll do exactly what Tim Walz did, probably. When candidates are this fake and lame and desperate, their surrogates don't have much to go on. So they end up sounding inauthentic and desperate. Here, for example, are Jennifer Garner and Julia Roberts making what could be the single most inauthentic acting performance in their respective careers, which is saying something. Watch.
I just hope that all the women here tonight talk to all the men that aren't here tonight. And all you brave men that are here tonight. Talk to all the other men that aren't here tonight. And let's just get it going. Enough with the fighting. Let's get to the uniting. Let's get to the joy. Let's get to the repair. Let's get to prices dropping, rents dropping.
Listen, I know you've knocked and knocked, and I know you've called and called. I know you've given and given, and you're worn out. But the truth is, you are the front lines. This is it. I mean, I'm looking at these beautiful faces, these women, and these strong men. God, is there anything sexier than a man who is like men for Kamala? You are the front line of this battle, for lack of a better word. It really is. There are two ways forward, and you guys are going to have a huge voice in how that way is chosen.
So Julia Roberts wants women to go home and nag their husbands and boyfriends into supporting Kamala Harris. And if they do that, then prices will come down and we'll have joy again in the country or something. Never mind the fact that Kamala Harris is the sitting vice president and that by Kamala Harris's own admission, she bears responsibility for the Biden administration's policies. But don't think about that. Just berate as many men as you can find until they relent and do what you want. And then there's Jennifer Garner saying that men who support Kamala are sexy. Perhaps that will convince men to rush out to the polls. If they aren't convinced by the camo hat or by a lecture from Barack Obama, maybe they'll do it to impress Jennifer Garner. But, I highly doubt it. And if you're a left-wing male and you're passionate about Kamala Harris, at this point, you need to be somebody like Harry Sisson, the DNC shill who posts a lot on TikTok. Like him, you can't have any shame or self-respect whatsoever. So here was his pitch to men that he just posted a couple of days ago. And let's see if he does any better. Watch.
There are a lot of cowardly men out there who are supporting Donald Trump and think it's manly to do so. I don't know about you folks, but when I was growing up, all of the men around me told me to respect women, treat them with the dignity that they deserve, don't bully women, don't insult women. Donald Trump has done every single one of those things. He's bullied women, insulted them for their age, weight, appearance, things of that nature. He was found liable in court by a jury of his peers for assaulting a woman. And of course, to this day, he brags about taking reproductive rights away from women. So if you're a man and you're supporting this guy, what's wrong with you? Get it together. If you are willing to overlook Donald Trump thinking that your wife, your daughter, your sister, your mother are just pieces of meat and that he doesn't care about them, then I'm sorry. You're a coward. Now take your Monster Energy drinks, your lifted truck, and get the hell out.
When I was growing up, says a guy who looks like he's 12, and here we have the Democrats going back to the same well, a well that's completely dry because there was never any water in it to begin with. But this is all they have on the left. They don't know how to appeal to men, so after the gimmicks fail, the hats and all that stuff, they resort to insufferable, pretentious, irritating lectures delivered by the most annoying and inauthentic people on earth. Now, it's true that men will sometimes respond to a little bit of harshness, a little bit of tough talk, the old coach's speech in the locker room at halftime type of thing, but only when that tough talk is delivered by somebody who is serious and strong and credible, a leader of men, not a mousy little dork who would cry and call his mom if he got a flat tire. But this is the strategy the Kamala Harris campaign is now using in order to win over male voters. It's a mixture of insults and condescension. But all this stuff fails because the Democrats' message to men is fundamentally emasculating and debasing. They can't even pretend to respect the voters they're trying ostensibly to appeal to here. They can't even pretend to respect men, even as they're trying to berate men into voting for them. But that's the point of it. It's why they're promoting Doug Emhoff as a prototypical male, even after he had an affair with his nanny, even after he was accused of hitting his ex-girlfriend. The position of the Harris-Walz campaign is that none of that matters. In their eyes, you're masculine as long as you do one thing and one thing only, which is to submit to whatever liberal women want you to do. Just do whatever they tell you. Now, the problem for the Kamala Harris campaign, the reason they're flailing so publicly is that despite Democrats' efforts to destroy it, actual masculinity still exists in this country. Men still exist. And in just a couple of weeks, to the great horror of Julia Roberts and Barack Obama, those men will vote. And they very well may be the ones who decide this election. Hey, YouTube, thanks for listening to the show. If you'd like access to my full show with no ads, you should go to dailywire.com and use promo code Walsh to get 2 months free on all annual plans. See you there.